That would be great. But we have now got all of our presenters, which is really good news. And we've got all of our audience, I think, or a large part of our audience. We've got almost 90 people out there ready to listen to this event. So can I say the warmest of welcomes? I'm Anita Taylor, and I'm here on behalf of Drawing Projects UK this afternoon, but I'm also the Dean of Duncan of Jordenston College of Art and Design at the University of Dundee, and I'm beaming in from Dundee this afternoon. We've been running from Drawing Projects UK a whole programme of drawing discussions, which the Drawing Symposium sits underneath as a series, alongside the Trinity Buoy Wharf Drawing Prize exhibition. And this is the almost last event. We've got one more thing to launch before the exhibition tours up to Cooper Gallery in Dundee. So it's a really fantastic opportunity to welcome you all this afternoon for part 2 of our Drawing Symposium, Drawing Lockdown. Part 1 focused on how drawing practitioners responded to the experience of the global pandemic through drawing. And part 2 focuses on online drawing programs and how drawing together and teaching drawing online developed during lockdown. So we have 12 fabulous speakers. Really looking forward to the PechaKucha session, which Chloe Briggs from Drawing is Free will introduce in a moment. But what I just wanted to say as an opening line is what a fantastic opportunity to talk as a community about the role that drawing plays, and to reflect as we do this on the value of community and connectivity and collective action that people have made in difficult times. So I'd like to just leave that part of the event there, and I know that we're going to have fabulous conversations as we proceed through the afternoon, and we're going to hear about amazing projects and programs and things that people undertook as a result of lockdown. So I'm going to hand over to Chloe. Can I just remind people you feel free to use the chat to chat, but if you want to ask a question, please drop those questions into the Q&A function that you'll find in the menu on the bottom of your screen or wherever it is. Can I say welcome? Great to see you all here, and a big welcome to Chloe, who's going to introduce the session. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hopefully I'm unmuted. Wonderful. Welcome, big warm welcome from Paris. This is just a short introduction because I want to hand quickly over to the amazing speakers we have today. I think it's an illusion that a serious drawing practice or education in drawing can only happen in a big spacious studio, a luxury that many of us can only imagine, let alone afford. The shift to working online that the pandemic imposed upon us as artists who draw and teachers of drawing has resulted in new possibilities for how we work. What has been created virtually during this time, as these presentations are testament, has eroded so much of the myth of the artist and art school studio, giving way to much more inclusive, accessible, and open spaces. Personally, as drawing is free, it's been life-changing. Over the past 2 years, I've never felt so closely connected, yet physically distant to so many inspiring people. And you're going to hear from them now. I'm just going to share, sorry for this little clunky moment while I share my screen and start you off. The slideshow. So part 1, we explore drawing, Kat Severston and Sarah Grace Dye, Georgie Bennett and Vanessa Lawrence. We explore drawing is the partnership of Jeanette Barnes and Paul Branford, working in schools and colleges around the UK. Jeanette Barnes has exhibited nationally and internationally, winning the Jerwood Drawing Prize, second prize in 2003, Hugh Castle Drawing Award, Royal Academy of Arts 2013, Working Drawing Award, Trinity Buoy Wharf Drawing Prize 2019, and she has taught for the Royal Academy of Arts, the Royal Drawing School and NSEAD. Paul Branford, who will be speaking today, won the Jerwood Drawing Prize in 2003. He has taught for the Royal Academy of Arts, the Crafts Council, the NSEAD, Crisis and Somerset House. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you. Here we go then. Yeah, traditionally, we've done all of our teaching in person, visiting schools and colleges, running a range of workshops, urban drawing, life drawing, portraiture, and they were always using dry materials, charcoal, Conte, chalk, and we encouraged our students to experiment on A3, A4, finding these larger drawings kind of filled with all the sort of images they'd found or ideas they discovered. But obviously lockdown meant we had to adapt that, and rather than sort of make workshops that were kind of imitations of the practical ones, we made them Zoom specific. So the range of materials expanded, but the works themselves were on a much more sort of intimate scale. Jeanette was lucky enough to get some good training from the Royal Drawing School. She taught interiors from 2020, summer 2020. Students kind of drew through their own living spaces, experimenting with visual shorthand, composition, and then making their own city pieces. A good deal of our content came directly from our own practice, capturing the experience of being in a place, balancing mood, structure, and energy within a single image. We used slideshows, films, printed images, imaginative texts to create the feeling of being somewhere, even if you were just kind of like stuck at home. Participants were often given like a single source image, and we wanted them to sort of interpret that in a range of ways. Primary students were directed to look closely for a range of qualities within an image, some dramatic, others more subtle, and instinctively handle those materials accordingly. The great bit was when individuals all held their outcome up to the screen and everyone was sort of surprised at sort of where they'd taken the source imagery. Extending this, we moved into sort of secondary, and there's a curiosity, isn't there, about how others see the world or how others see a solution differently, and that's often nourished by not giving lots of source material. Students sort of worked with about 3 or 4 images on those. Sometimes they did, though, need a bit of technical help. So, you know, things look a bit daunting sometimes. So like a step-by-step approach to certain things, we kind of like hooked up our external camera to kind of show people how, and it's much more sort of effective than, say, struggling for a verbal explanation. We used a lot of film clips, play them, pause, and play them, pause. And it creates a sort of an immediacy. We do a lot of cheap felt pens because most people could get hold of those, not prestige art materials. So that in a way creates a freedom to play. Changes in colour kind of allows it a clarity the image otherwise might just becoming a little bit kind of too entangled. We used collage quite often. So we're inviting a sense of like abrupt disruption, a kind of energizing sense of surprise, bringing the subject to life. So it's something more surprising than just like a reportage. Not just for the cut and paste aesthetic, but for how materials combine or don't combine. Elements might be scaled up or down. In my workshop, I also used sort of collage, but this one here, portrait workshop, people actually cut number of Lucian Freud's portraits of his mum to kind of make a sort of subtle cubist thing, really. We obviously chose images for people to use, but essentially they're kind of like templates for people to kind of take for their other images. This was a bit tricky. Tried it out in advance. Drawing from a film. Couldn't keep up, so I worked out to kind of play less film, put it on a loop, pause it, so some of the heads got reworked a couple of times. So again, the sort of trialing stuff in advance really helped things out. We ran our session in a couple of ways. We held Eventbrite ticketed workshops for individuals. We'd get school students wanting to catch up on their coursework, interested adults, some from arts backgrounds, some not. We got a few art teachers wanting to refresh their own practice or find new things to teach. Through the website, schools could, and they still do, book sessions online lasting anywhere between 1 and 3 hours. If the school was open, we'd be patched through to a classroom like this one. If not, we'd be patched through into students' homes. Yeah, Microsoft Teams, eh? That was a bit clunky and haphazard coming out of a share, but on the whole, it was fine. Jeanette did a lot of drawing. We all did our own drawing online. It was quite a unique opportunity in that respect. I spent a lot of time drawing with just a pad and pencil. Jeanette signed up to online drawing live sessions sometimes. Sometimes they were, as you'd expect, other times more theatrical, using costumes or props or movement-based. So Jeanette sort of created her own figure and movement workshop built around film and still imagery. We had the space to kind of like when we were making films at the studio, pull the camera back so we didn't get sort of like some of the distortions that you see in more sort of like intimate setups. I'm ahead of time now. Oh, we go. Oh, it's been a race against time. And this is my own prep for drawing into painting. And the majority of drawing into painting was kind of that bit where drawing and painting overlap. A lot of like bristly kind of monochrome painting. And so students could sort of like trust their own decision making, their own impulses across a number of works, generating a sense of choice. Yeah, teachers asked me, some of my teacher friends kind of asked me to run a kind of oil painting workshop. And I had the feeling it was a bit kind of conventional, but I think lockdown kind of gave us more kind of like time, space to contemplate things. So even like something as obvious as still life painting was quite a hit. This one was going for a demo from a pastel drawing workshop. I like to kind of disrupt my obvious know-how or predictable development. So under the pastel is a lot of random ink and gesso. If you look, there's a Bob Ross cabin thrown in as well. So I made this one live in front of the students. So there's a bit of risk going on, element of play. Jeanette, working in more intimate conditions, sort of reassessing, discovering familiar and unfamiliar art materials, big component of our teaching and practice. So the little bits of teaching and prepping and exploring, just to kind of allow us to exploit the act of drawing, find more possibility within it. So we were lucky enough, we offered a book deal. So we developed a book about urban drawing, bringing in lots of elements that formed our approach to teaching online. Oddly, without the lockdowns, without the Zoom, the felt tips, the marker pens, the iPads, the book would have been a very, very, very different thing indeed. So the lockdown, in some weird way, was a blessing.
Thank you so much, Paul. I think you bring everything so alive. It's amazing that that's actually made online, all of those drawings. Incredible. Thank you. Over to Kat Severston and Sarah Grace Dye. Met in 2004 whilst teaching at the Arts Institute in Bournemouth. They bonded over their love of drawing, philosophy on teaching, shared aesthetic and understanding of arts as wellness. Kat and Sarah have formal education to the master's level with studio practices based in drawing. They are keen collaborators, educators and advocates for the power of drawing. Their work has been experienced across multiple platforms, and with a combined total of 60 years of professional practice, they remain enthusiastically in the game. Over to you both.
January 2020 with Kat in Prince George, British Columbia, and me in Sheffield, UK, both in need of connectivity and a creative project. We started planning for the summer of 2020. I was hoping to be in Seattle for an artist book conference in June and had thought that while in the vicinity, I could connect creatively with Kat. Choreography of Trust was born. Each artist would mail 2 postcards a week, one with text and no image, and the other with an image and no text. The other would respond accordingly, and we would gently explore each other's lives, thoughts, experiences in a fresh way before meeting in person again.
Dearest Sarah, I fear our wonderful, beloved project has succumbed to the flu, which means it is no longer viable. I grieve this great loss. Sarah's reply proves our tenacity for continuing, reimagining our residency from in-person to virtual. Even though we got funding to upgrade our tech, as you can see from our faces, it didn't make it any easier, but we persevered. Opening our daily sessions with blind contour drawing, taking turns to lead, maybe with an inspired bit of writing, music, ideas on materials and methods, making space for our day of drawing.
My postcard collection took forever to get to Canada. There were few flights and long delays in customs. We created PowerPoints to share our responses via Zoom, so we didn't lose out on that moment of exchange. And it was beautiful, a serendipitous moment of recognition. We hung the show, me on Zoom via laptop being walked around to see the space, Kat doing all the hard work in person. There needed to be a choreography of trust between us to get the job done to the satisfaction of us both. The drawing is one of the postcards that we sent and holds the essence of the dance we were experiencing.
We hosted a virtual and in-person reception at Ambanika in North Central British Columbia, me on the ground and Sarah in Iceland. We delivered 2 workshops grounded in drawing. Impressively, considering how we started with the tech, Sarah was able to connect with the students as I carried the laptop around the room. A couple of months after the residency, we invited Fran to join our, at the time, artist bookmaking exchange. But then we quickly realized it was drawing with like-minded souls that we all craved. Choreography of Trust experiences her 3rd rebirth.
We took it in turns to lead the sessions. For this one, I suggested one person be an interviewer, one person be the interviewee, and the 3rd person would draw the person being interviewed and then alternate. It was a great moment of connection and discovery on multiple levels through drawing and observing. From that session, we decided to invite one person each to join with us, as we wanted to share this beautiful connectivity through drawing we were experiencing. Some months later, 2 more people joined. Many of these connections came through my virtual relationships on Instagram, and most of us have never met in the flesh.
We begin each session with a grounding exercise, a guided meditation, or simply a reminder to breathe. We do this in order to travel out of our heads and enter the sacred space of creativity. As mentioned, we share the lead, maybe with music, story, observation, or an idea about methods and approaches, using studio materials to hand, whether in the kitchen, the laundry room, the basement, or purpose-built studio. For this session, we abandoned the pressure of studio materials in favor of those found in the kitchen.
We rarely speak once the act of drawing begins. I think this slide shows well how absorbed we become in the act of drawing. I remember hearing the phrase ambient presence during the Drawing Symposium last year and immediately knew that described perfectly what I was experiencing. Completely absorbed both drawing and being an integral part of the collective presence. We use what is in front of us, which can often be the very thing we are drawing. The drawings have a life of their own and dictate the direction they want to take us in.
We are connected by drawing, by the process of it, making marks that trace time. Artifacts of such are a byproduct of this process, and within that, they present new possibilities. Choreography of Trust inspired this collaborative artist book that I created during the first lockdown. I invited 24 artists from around the world to a party, a garden party, the COVIDian garden party. Sarah was the first to be invited. Fran, Tracy, and Anne Rose, who are part of our group, were also guests at the party.
These are thoughts from some of our colleagues. For some of us, it is 10 a.m. when we meet to draw, and for some of us, it is 7 p.m. Some of us have piles of snow and some have snowdrops, but we all come together to draw, and we have built a community. I find it challenging, something different each time. The time sort of falls away as we each work. That was Anne Rose. I really appreciate the fact that we take on the sessions in turn, therefore we are confronted to very different approaches concerning drawing. What does drawing mean for each of us? And that pushes us out of our usual comfort zone. It is like an open window on the possibilities and it enriches our practice. Martine.
From Tracy, we listen to each other draw notes like a favored jazz vinyl, knowing we are not alone. We are in community together, but so very far apart. Drawing across continents during lockdown has sustained my practice at times when I could have felt isolated and quite hopeless. Sharing ideas by doing, making, and talking has enriched and broadened the potential of drawing. That's from Fran. So we just like to thank Fran, Martine, and Rose, Kasia, Tracy, and Claire for dancing with us.
Beautiful. What a beautiful presentation. You just proved there how this time has collapsed distance in this very special way. Amazing. Thank you. And the trust you have between you to do that presentation together also. Thank you. Now over to Georgie Bennett, who is a lecturer at Falmouth University and a freelance illustrator based in Cornwall. Georgie enjoys making work inspired by real locations and loves to draw in plein air. en plein air, rather. Over to you,
Thank you very
Georgie.
much, Chloe. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. So I'm going to talk about drawing from Google Maps, Google Street View and Google Earth, and the launch of Sketchbook eVenture, which is an online drawing series set up in 2020. Yeah. So I love sketchbook drawing and, as Chloe said, drawing en plein air. But during lockdown, during the summer, I was getting a little bit bored of just drawing around my local village. So I decided to go on my cancelled holiday to Berlin virtually. So I went by Google Street View and started drawing around Berlin using the Google Pegman to drop down into unknown streets. So here are some of those images, and I published this sketchbook online using Issue. I'd use different color paper, and I would draw the Google interface features, recording my experience as a virtual traveler through the space, exploring landmarks and hidden gems and different times of the day. During the summer, I'd often draw with my lovely friend Shana, who I met on a drawing residency, and we'd visit places that we both love and enjoy. And again, we would use the Google Street View Pegman to drop down into unknown streets and wander virtually, talking through Zoom, finding areas that we wanted to draw. We would set ourselves little drawing tasks and mini workshops to time constraints and using thumbnailing. So these are some drawings we did in Thailand, looking at a little market scene happening. And it was much about having fun as challenging our drawing practice. So we would find little funny moments of people falling off motorbikes and things like that, and just having a good time. I also really enjoyed using the 3D feature that Google Maps has. I think it's a wonderful way to view our world. We can glide and fly over these cities that Google has captured by the Google plane. These are some more images from Shana from our drawing sessions, and we would travel together. We would challenge ourselves with difficult perspectives and busy scenes with lots of signs. And we were both really interested in creating little mini workshops, which helped to bridge the imaginary and the observational drawing as well, to find stories. This is Jason and I drawing together in Paris, where we're drawing the same scene. And sometimes it's you can easily forget that it's not a static image, that you can zoom in and zoom out and look up and down and move through the space virtually. And what Jason always did was zoom in and use the crop and find new compositions. So I was really excited by this experience. So I launched Sketchbook eVenture during 2020 in January. It was originally a limited series of 8. Oh, sorry, 2021, not 2020. And our sessions grew. We had teachers, students, adults, children, people that just wanted to learn how to draw and escape a little bit. And it was about bringing different people around the world into the same virtual place and time. Each workshop was an hour. We would do a virtual tour, some warm-up exercises, look at some artists, have a break, and then do a longer drawing exercise and share our work on Padlet. It was about having fun, so not being caught up, or you can make mistakes and just have fun. One of my favorite bits of the session was when we shared our work on Padlet, which is an online platform, which is the digital version of essentially putting work up on the wall. So here are some examples from different sessions there. And it was like the revealing of what people had been up to. I was really excited by the different interpretations that people would do of the different places we went to. So here are some from Antarctica. So we have one on the left there of a really atmospheric drawing of Scott's Hut, and a really poetic imagined drawing of icebergs, and a really wonderfully well-observed moment of cheeky penguins. Another place I really love to draw is Venice. So all the canals are street mapped by Google, so you can essentially boat down canals. And there's some examples of the warm-up exercises of using thumbnails to draw and create little panels and stories. And there's an image on the right there of someone's personal experience of overlaying images. This session was using the 3D feature over Paris, which I know a lot of people were very nervous about. But in the end, I think everybody enjoyed it. And one person said, I loved Paris from above, and maybe it was because I thought I was going to hate it. But although I found it challenging, I overcame my fear of drawing from above, and I want to do more. So that was really great to hear, actually, that lots of people wanted to continue drawing using Street View. Here's some images from Argentina, where we were looking at limiting color palettes in order to challenge ourselves to create a colourful, vibrant place. There are limitations to Google Street View. So actually this place, Chefchaouen in Morocco, has not had the Google car visit it, but loads of travellers have been there. So we dropped down into what I call these little bubbles where people have added their 360 views, and then we would go there and travel around. Underwater Earth is really incredible as well. They're a non-profit charity that work with Google to create Street View underwater, so you can virtually swim. So they're really fun to draw and get to. You can also go virtual skiing on mountains. They've got sheep view, so they've got put Google cameras onto sheep as well. So just fantastic ways to view our world. And yeah, for me, it was really great to get lots of positive feedback from everybody from these sessions. I loved sharing Google Maps as a visual research tool to inspire drawing, but I soon found that it also meant escaping our lockdown world into a virtual one where we were free to travel and make connections through drawing. I really encourage takeovers as well. So we've had 2 takeovers so far, one from Pat, who took us on a nature adventure, drawing with sticks and spices, and Janouk took us to Glastonbury for a party. So it continues, Sketchbook eVenture continues on the first Monday of every month. So we've got one coming up on Monday. And yeah, really encourage takeovers for new voices, new ideas, new adventures. So feel free to join, it's free, we donate to travel, and it's about escapism, to learn together, to explore and draw together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I had the sense that you're an artist who has wings. You can fly anywhere. Brilliant. Thank you, Vanessa. So over to Vanessa now. Vanessa Lawrence is an artist and gallery educator, a graduate of University of Brighton, Masters of Fine Art and PGCE in Art and Design. She's a student at the Royal Drawing School, taking the postgraduate development year online in its pilot year. During lockdown, she has pushed her practice both as a graphic novelist and artist, exploring drawing, weaving narrative, and layering observed moments to create striking, vivid imagery. She is a VIA Prize finalist 2020 and FIDA Fashion Award finalist 2021. Her work looks at ways to give agency to marginalized voices and create narrative inspired by dance, performance, fashion, film, and photography. Thank you, Vanessa. I'll go to your first slide.
I began to rekindle my love of drawing at the Royal Drawing School in 2017, taking the Drawing from Film course. This offered the bridge between my former practice as a photographer and my first love of drawing, and the key to navigating the new world of Zoom life drawing. My return to drawing created a desire to apply for the postgraduate drawing development year and to devote a year to pushing my practice. My first zine was developed at the Royal Drawing School and nominated in lockdown for the Comedy Women Print Prize 2020. It's a darkly humorous graphic memoir about my cancer experience in 2015. Being nominated for this award alongside Posey Simmons and Danny Noble was incredible. Having this honest and difficult narrative in the spotlight was incredibly humbling. I wanted to develop my graphic narrative work and took the first online course of Royal Drawing School with tutor Dr. Sarah Lightman to develop this work. At the end of the course, we were encouraged to maintain the group and publish our own work as a zine and get our work out there into the world. We formed Distant Connections Art Collective. We published the Lockdown Lowdown graphic narratives of viral times. Our first zine explored the moment of international lockdown and development of coursework. The second zine took the creative drawing prompt of "If this isn't nice, what is?" from Kurt Vonnegut, thinking about the positive moments that we've been experiencing in these difficult times. Our zine, cohort, and platform was opening up and expanding to artists. We launched our open call for artists on International Women's Day 2021 to create Women in COVID, a Gendered Pandemic, with support from Oxford University. We opened our zine to include drawing, illustration, poetry, and explored zine making as research and documentation. We took our work to the Graphic Medicine Unconvention last summer and had our first in-person meetup at Hackney Comic Fair. This is I Can't Breathe, 9 Still Moments, Marching on a Sunday 2020, and my VIA Arts Prize finalist work. These drawings were inspired by the original filmed choreography of principal dancer at the Royal Opera House, Marching on a Sunday, who posted it on Instagram. Born out the question of how do you protest in a pandemic, these 9 drawings grew out of charcoal black paper on Blackout Tuesday. From Blackout Tuesday, it was a summer of draw and pause, meditative moments that grew over time. Posting the process from charcoal paper to emerging portraits became my form of protest. I have strong feelings about acknowledging creative sources and strive for consent and collaboration. I approach Muchly Asambe for his approval to take this work and message to the prestigious Via Arts Prize and exhibition at the Brazilian Embassy in London. Lockdown paused the physical show, so I created an edition of prints in response to public interest. I took this project to Kickstarter with stretch goals of gifting prints to the dance school in Lisbon that nurtured his talent and the Royal Ballet School in London. I found creating this work and my time in Muchly Asambe and public support incredibly moving and inspiring. Lockdown life drawing online and beyond. My next slide is going to show lots of groups you may be very familiar with, actually. So we have London Drawing, To Be or Not to Be, Art Makes Sense in the Netherlands, Amy with an I, which is Amy Benton, Draw Brighton with the fabulous Jake Spicer, and the Sarah Bund Foundation, with an international cohort of models and facilitators who maintained and grew their creative communities. I thank you. During Cabaret Couture with Janet and Matthew, they transformed their boutique immersive drawing sessions to online, and it was facilitated by a patron at the beginning of lockdown. They welcomed me into their world of fashion and creativity, Janet modeling and Matthew creating sets and art direction each week. Fashion editorial shoots slowed down to create and draw. With unique experience and access to fashion community, they create sessions with inspiring emerging talent and established couture artists. 2 hours of creative flow and collaborations with magazines to get my work out there. They felt brave to create new work and push it forward to exist in print. When I met Janet at a drawing session at Draw Brighton before COVID, she said, "I love my work. I love telling stories, playing characters, building worlds. And the best thing about it is I get to do it with my friends." This has come through in the work Janet and Matthew create and the work that I've made from these sessions. On New Year's Day, I was interviewed by Gold Foil magazine, and it felt like both a celebration of work and a reflective moment. London Fashion Week offered a marathon of drawing opportunities. When lockdown restrictions paused, mixing and close contact, Drawing Cabaret Couture produced fashion films to showcase talent. Drawing in the studio this year felt very special, a full circle moment. I appreciate the different qualities of drawing live in the studio and the richness and tenacity of online opportunities. This is from FIDA, Fashion Illustration Design Awards. I was nominated throughout lockdown with work exhibiting at the Ultramarine Summer Show and in the prestigious Design District in Miami. And this one is the Met After Midnight with Karen Elson and Mushino. Main response to a film posted on Instagram in the small hours. Her response was instant and glowing. It was the finalist in the 4th FIDA Award and a successful Kickstarter Make 100 project this year. The spark was instant, full of Angela Carter narrative, iconic, powerful, with a sense of agency and wit. I'm a student at the Royal Drawing School, taking the postgraduate drawing development year online in its pilot year. It has been an incredible year of developing my practice, growing my creative community, and pushing my sense of accountability to my work, taking my work further each week. Each week has seen 3 full and rich days of courses that explore narrative, colour, mythology, folklore, memory, and imagination. Together, we have explored artists as mentors, looking at how significant work of art can assist in growing your own work and practice. I've had the opportunity to grow my methods of creating work, to challenge myself, to push past blocks and start to flow. Support from tutors and mentors has sparked new ideas and the ability to see ways forward with a vibrant and sustainable practice. I'd like to quote Royal Drawing School tutor Perrine Christian, who says, "As an artist, one of the most helpful things for my practice and a sense of belonging has been having a community of other artists. We need to know we're not making into a void. With tenacity and accountability and valuing my creative community, I look forward to moving forward." Thank you very much for the opportunity of sharing my work today.
What extraordinary energy, Vanessa. Wow. It's so inspiring, all four of those presentations. Thank you so much. I know I'm now going to stop sharing the screen here and go back. We're going to, Anita's going to field some of the questions that might have come from the audience. If there are some.
I will, and I'm just trying to, there's just one question which is actually for Georgie. And the question is about whether you used iPads to draw for the e-venture, and I'm trying to spotlight you at the same time.
Okay, yeah. Well, I always used a laptop, but I know lots of other people did use iPads, and sometimes I would have to try and quickly Google if people were on Mac or PC, because if you're doing the 3D world, it's good if you can learn the controls a little bit to navigate the view that you want to have to draw from. I've actually got my boyfriend's iPad that I used as well when I'm drawing, which is sometimes a little bit easier because you can just use your fingers rather than trying to click and drag. But yeah, I think everybody used lots of different things. The only thing you can't really do it very well on is a phone, just because you can't get the views that you probably want to get, and it's a bit slow. But yeah, iPads, laptops, yeah.
That's a fantastic to know that, and I'm sure that answered the question. I've put you all up on screen to encourage people to ask a question, but what I would like to say is what an amazing array of practices developed from individual motivations to connecting to building community, and how many parties were there in there, as well as protest and really serious social connections and political connections, because I'm really thrilled to see how much people connected through drawing and made you know, an amazing array of work, both individually but as communication, and the sense of the online opening up just seems really terrific. So I'd like to say thank you. I'm sure Chloe will. We are about to move on to the other sessions.
Thank you.
I always need,
I think I always need a few weeks to absorb everything that I've learned and seen. It's so inspiring. Thank you. What energy. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen again and move into the second part. Okay. So part two, we begin with Callan McKeown. Is a queer disabled fine artist and drawing tutor originally from East London. They're here today to talk about their life drawing session, Queer Life Drawing. It's virtual class, and they work exclusively with LGBTQIA+ life models. Callan's practice started with 2 years of training in traditional drawing and life drawing. They have since done an MFA, and their practice now centers on the trans figure and concepts of gender. They began Queer Life Drawing in February 2021 in order to create a safe space for queer artists and models to work online, as well as raise the representation of queer bodies, such as their own, in life drawing spaces and contemporary drawing. Over to you, Callan. Oops,
thank you,
sorry. Oops, sorry, that went incredibly fast. Sorry, there we go. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chloe, and hello, everyone. Firstly, I'd like to thank everyone for having me here, and everyone who has spoken before me. It's a real privilege to be on a lineup with so many fantastic people, and I'm excited to be here. So yes, I'm Callan, and I started Queer Life Drawing back last year in February in order to raise, as we said, the representation of the queer figure in life drawing spaces. And today I'd like to talk about who we are, what we do, and the consequences of a life drawing session such as Queer Life Drawing.
Sorry, there's something wrong with my slide here. Let me just restart. I don't want to give the game away. Let me just restart. Sorry, there was something wrong there. There we go. Sorry, Callan. I'll take it to that.
That's all right.
Oops, there's something wrong with the speed of them.
Seems like it's automatically moving through them.
It is. And I tell you what, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to fix it. 2 seconds. I'm very sorry. I know why it is. I know why it is. Bear with me, everyone.
These things happen.
I know. It hasn't happened to me before. I was getting too confident here.
So if anyone wants a very short break, but don't
exactly,
take their eyes off the screen.
No, it won't take me a second. Sorry to do this to you.
That's fine.
There we go. I will take you to the slides that you were on. There we go. Fixed. Go ahead, Callan.
Thank you, Chloe. So here's where it all began, and where I host a session every week. As the world opens up again, we will maintain our weekly session online in order to sustain our international reach and accessibility. However, I am currently looking for an accessible venue for in-person events in Edinburgh as well. These are just two of my drawings I completed myself during lockdown. As mentioned, I trained for 2 years in life drawing and have worked as a life model now and drawing tutor for the best part of about 8 years. Life drawing and figurative work continue to fascinate me. My background and current practice, which centers on the transfigure, certainly led me to start queer life drawing. As a virtual session, our community relies on virtual platforms. So on screen, you can just see a shot of our Discord server, which we use in addition to social media for online discussions and for our participants to share space and resources. And then, you know, would there be a Zoom-based event without our furry companions, which really need to mention because they come up a lot in our sessions. On screen, you can see a workspace of one of our regulars, and that's their art manager, Snickers. The domesticity of our sessions certainly adds a very wholesome spin on the whole event. There's a lot of heartwarming moments, and generally folks who attend sessions are warm and friendly with each other, which makes for a really encouraging atmosphere, which is a priority for queer life drawing because there are obviously a lot of political aspects to drawing queer people for straight and LGBTQIA+ people alike, and it helps to have a relaxed atmosphere. The majority of our regulars are queer themselves, and over the last year, many have found the opportunity to draw from queer folks to be a very healing experience. Trans representation in the media is broadly false and harmful. And so attendees to our sessions have been known to talk about the release they have felt drawing from bodies that represent them and or their community. And as queer life drawing is a virtual space, it tells queer stories in real time. I've had multiple models contact me to model both before and after certain surgeries or milestones in their transitions. Other models want the autonomous opportunity to represent themselves authentically in public and jump at the opportunity to express their identities and their culture to a safe audience. On screen, you can see Kirsty and Vicky. These are actually friends of mine who had a big fat lesbian wedding last year. And these girls are absolute rock stars. They actually had jackets made up for their wedding day to wear over their dresses. It was very cool. But they got married on a Saturday and then posed for us on the Monday so that they could share their story with us, and it was amazing. And this is Camille, who posed as Xavier. Xavier is a manifestation of their gender fluidity, as well as a sort of drag performance and or alter ego. We've had a few drag performers by this stage, one non-binary horror drag performer and one trans drag queen as well. Drag is very important to us culturally and goes a lot deeper than mainstream American television might suggest. One consequence of a life drawing session such as queer life drawing versus non-specific life drawing is the privilege and opportunity to challenge your own preconceptions about queer people. It's a very powerful thing to observe and draw from a queer person, inviting you to witness their humanity away from the noise of the everyday. And drawing, of course, a practice that to folks like me and many of us speakers is daily. Drawing is free. But it's been, commodified. And so I've had thoughts about producing creative work, especially drawing. It's something children do with ease and excitement, but sadly, most children are told it's a waste of time or something they're not good at. So whether I'm teaching or running queer life drawing, I focus on talking about creativity as belonging to those who use it. I like to queer ideas around drawing if I can, which is to say twist ideas around drawing. It's a form of communication that is excellent for our well-being, and I don't believe the commodification of our work is its only value. The drawings from our sessions remind me of oral histories, oral records of queer events. Those who attend our sessions are keeping a personalized and alternative record of our classes, and the virtual drawing space has allowed attendees to reach us from France, Texas, Malaysia. The virtual space breaks the confines of a physical one and brings us everyday and domestic queer narratives and brings those into a worldwide arena of storytelling. And while there are lots of people who don't feel as safe or confident attending in-person courses or workshop, virtual drawing spaces provide an opportunity to work from the safety of your own home, which in turn supports a safe opportunity to practice your drawing, which is especially important to those who don't have access to spaces like queer life drawing in their own homes. We're very strict though. We are a sober space and we have strict rules for engagement. You can find a copy on our Instagram if you're interested in reading up more about those, but the rules seem to help provide exactly the right info to allow the right people to come and find us. I think part of Queer Life Drawing's charm is that this hugely political and powerful practice is punctuated by visits from the model's cat or snake. As you can see on screen, silly jokes made in breaks by me, a lot of the time it's me, and an irreverency that makes the vulnerable drawing, modeling, and community experience feel normal. And it's not just us doing this work. On screen, you have a short selection of other life drawing spaces that work specifically with marginalized bodies. I highly recommend going and following them on Instagram if you can. And I'd like to make an honorary mention of To Be or Not To Be Collective, who will be speaking in part 3 this afternoon, who are bloody amazing and really diverse as well. So our next session for Queer Life Drawing is actually tomorrow, starting at the same time as this event at 3 p.m. GMT. And you can find all of the info you might need for that session on our Instagram. Please go and follow us there. And we sell tickets on a sliding scale, so you should be able to find an affordable option for yourself. And we also raise money and take donations in order to be able to provide free tickets for many of the people within our community who aren't able to afford access to sessions such as these. So, you know, if you fancy giving us a donation, get in touch. We have a PayPal. It's very easy to do so. But thank you for listening to me. It has been an absolute pleasure to tell you about Queer Life Drawing, and I look forward to hearing everyone else's.
Thank you so much, Callan. You speak so brilliantly, and even though I messed up your slides, about such powerful work and experiences. Thank you. Amazing. Over to Lizzie Kinsella, is a visual artist based in Sligo, Ireland. She received her BFA and MFA from Belfast School of Art. Lizzie is the programme chair for the Fine Art undergraduate programme at the Atlantic Technological University, IT Sligo, and has lectured in painting, drawing there for the past 30 years. Lizzie works in a diverse range of materials and mediums. Her practice centres around drawing, expanded painting, and bookmaking. She exhibits widely in Ireland and internationally, and is a member of the Floating World Artist Book Collective, 9 Artist Collective, and the Drawing Box. Over to you, Lizzie.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me here today. I'm going to talk to you today about the Drawing Box. It's a group that organised themselves mostly around COVID, and we are made particularly to support each other in our drawing practice. It's a global art collective with about 500 members. About 150 of us have been active in projects and participating in projects that are hosted or invited. It's an artist-led group. We share and discuss our drawings. Members put forward ideas for drawing projects or for exhibitions, and then people can choose whichever one they want to be in, or how little or how much they want to be involved in. We host an open forum for our members on Facebook, where we share and discuss our drawing practice. The collective has evolved to include a number of online drawing events, such as drawing conversations, exhibitions, and stuff like that. We have kind of formal and informal get-togethers, and we also have formal projects and informal projects. So the mainstay of the collective throughout the lockdown really was studio visits. These were pre-recorded or recorded live. They involved takeovers of Facebook with some of the artists for the day of our Facebook forum. They offered a phenomenal lockdown support, showing real conditions for making in temporary studios and ad hoc spaces. We've over 70 archive members' visits, and members can dip in and out of those whenever they want. So another part of our more informal activities during lockdown was online bookmaking and online drawing. So these were live events hosted by different members of the group, and people came together for an afternoon session or an hour or so at a time and made things live together. One of my favorite ones was the Exquisite Corpse, which we got coordinates in advance. We all arrived with our little piece of paper, and we eventually, after our drawing session, our host made a digital concertina book for us. Another was cloud drawing, where people took their laptops outside into their gardens for an hour or so together and just spent an afternoon drawing. As we've gone along in 2020, our group has become a little bit more organised, and we've had some more formal conversations have developed out of our chats. Among these are these sessions where we invite members to put up their favourite drawing or an influential drawing to their practice, and then we sort of sit around and discuss it. That was a little bit like going to art college without the assessments. It was really fun. One of our biggest strands really that has developed out of Drawing Box is exhibitions, and some of these are sort of large group exhibitions, and then others are sort of like ad hoc exhibitions. So we've got 3 strands there, 5 by A5 drawing strand, 1 drawing a day, and a large show with 0 drawings. The first one we were involved in was the pop-up exhibitions, where artists hosted exhibitions in their studios, in temporary spaces, and sometimes in gardens and art centres. So Athens School of Art had their students host one, and their lecturer and students made the work. I'm going to get you to stop for a second, Chloe, there. The artists and students made the work, and the students, installed the work, and the students actually made a series of work to go with that, and they exhibited that alongside us. So you can go on ahead now, Chloe. Yeah. This is my work for that particular body of work, and I think that our practice kind of changed and it grew, and we supported each other, and we were kind of like, as we shared each week in the Facebook forum, we were looking at how our work was developing. So with these shows, there are sort of 60 members or so, or 50 members or so with a lot of these shows, so there can be up to 300 drawings being installed at a time in any of the venues. This particular project developed from the other one, and it was to draw 30 drawings in 30 days, and then to have a touring exhibition with that. So far, it's been to Brittany, Paris, and to Greece. Part of that was really supportive, where we were looking at each other's work each day. We were helping each other. I would get up in the morning and go to Instagram to see what was happening with people I was connecting with. I've chosen 2 here of people who work in health board settings and in community settings. Just think those are really poignant examples of the drawing that were coming out of our lockdown studios at the time. Those are mine. They're based around walks and kind of aerial views of my neighbourhood. We could only go 3 kilometres in Ireland at a certain point in time, so restricted to the same places again and again. I didn't time that very well. So our biggest final strand in Drawing Box was the ambition to put forward a large exhibition that would go to India. It developed out of discussion very early on about the scale of drawing, and we were making drawings. We decided to make drawings for A1. We made A5, planning to make A5 or different sizes. So the ambition to make really large drawings came out of that as well. The kind of time and the kind of sustainedness that would happen, that we would reflect on what we were doing. And we produced a catalogue for that show as well. That show was to happen this summer, and COVID lockdown has caused a lot of problems with it going forward. So there was a kind of a poignancy that grew out of a lot of the work that we made around then, real sense of isolation and a real sense of kind of empty, or sort of, like aloneness in the spaces. Quite a lot of the work has a kind of, if you look through the catalogue even at the moment, quite a lot of the work has a sort of sense of containment, or a kind of sense of springing forward. Like this piece of Emma's over on the right-hand corner, which is her daughter cartwheeling. Part of that show as well, we gifted some A3 drawings to the permanent collection of the Kinner Nyack Foundation, where we're going to have the show. And I sort of feel that this particular page in our catalogue felt like a whole exhibition in itself on a page. I think for me, the whole time that I was in COVID and lockdown, I got a lot more time to work than I normally would, because I'm normally lecturing and trying to keep my studio running mostly in the summer and holidays. And also the challenge of materials, there wasn't really much to use. So I normally make collage, but I didn't have any glue left. So I had to start sewing my drawings together. And I just sort of like, it pushed me, and the support I got pushed me to change scale and explore in a different way than I would ever have thought possible. So the Drawing Box has a lot more information, a lot more images available to it on Drawing Box International. We literally are a set of drawings in a box traveling around the world, hopefully disseminating more information and more joy from drawing, and hopefully brought a bit of love during the lockdown. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You see in constraints how creative people kind of overcome them, and your drawings change. So I love seeing that. Thank you. Nadine Heller is next. Nadine studied painting and drawing in New York and received a master's diploma from the New York Academy of Art and an MFA degree from Columbia University. She previously chaired the Visual Studies Department at Drexel University, currently teaching drawing at Middlesex College, where she also served as gallery director for 5 years. Her students arrive with wildly different levels of preparation for college, so she is constantly on the lookout for new ways to teach foundations remotely. She has had interesting results with the composition assignment that she's presenting today. Her own drawings can be seen at #Heller642 on Instagram. Over to you, Nadine.
Okay, thank you for having me. As mentioned, I teach drawing, and it's at a community college. where the students begin their studies, some with absolutely no drawing experience at all. My courses are arranged teaching observational drawing as well as drawing from imagination. One of the interesting things is that the preference teaching drawing among faculty where I work is to use a viewfinder for composition. And I was struck by the idea that there was a presumption that just by framing something you compose. The project that I am going to show you just needs charcoal and eraser, an 18 by 24 sheet of paper. Each image is shown separately for 1 minute, and students begin to draw, establishing their composition. In the second round, you extend the time for each image to 2 to 3 images, and in the final round, 5 minutes per image. Unlike here, the pictures are shown at the same scale, right? They're not and I provide 3 to 4 source images per drawing. This is an example of one of the projects that students produced. And in order to make these, they need to look at the source images that I select and make strategic choices about the subject matter. They're allowed to change scale. They are allowed to repeat elements. And then what I find is that while I select the images, they narrow down it narrows down their choices so they can focus on learning certain concepts I want them to understand. The difference between my choices and their choices is a relationship that I'm trying to figure out. The goal of observational drawing, I think, is to create a likeness through depiction and mastery of conventions that govern sort of a sense of collective reality. And this is done through rules, parameters of the projects, and so on, by depicting a shared subject. In these 3 images, I deal with both familiar things and unfamiliar things. And I was struck by how well I thought the students responded in their compositional choices, negative and positive spaces, and so on. I feel that this assignment gave them more choices, and that sometimes the students were able to also invent things that were not there, but which they needed to be there. This assignment could also be expanded to include the development of a drawing into a painting. I really felt that students were able to sort of plumb depths within themselves that they would not ordinarily have been able to do. This is the 3rd set of images. In these, I was dealing a lot with pattern. And these, the patterning is something that I'm personally interested in my own work. Here's an example of a student putting something in their drawing that was not in any of the shown works, which is the male figure behind. And the sort of recycling of some of the patterned elements. Here's another view of this work. And I think it's so significant as to what students notice and what they choose to depict. And I think the subjectivity of the images is something that I was really encouraging in my students. Again, this is another image taken from that same series of works. And how I believe that the students' needs sort of determine their drawing and what they choose to depict, even given similar things. I think what makes people so interesting is how we reflect on how we interface with reality, and by projecting the feelings and needs or pains or desires that we project. And that's kind of how our realities are built, I think. I liked this image because I felt that there were all kinds of other things that were put in, like horror movie themes and so on, like the evil rabbit or versus the tame rabbit, or the innocent child versus like a wicked wraith. And so some of the images became more disturbing than others, dealing with issues of beauty and ugliness, the innocence or the sinister. And a lot was about visual memory. And so kids who couldn't compose at all from visual memory or draw from their imaginations, because they said they couldn't see anything in their minds, like they almost, as if they had aphantasia, which I don't believe they did, were able to, compose rather complex compositions using this method. The most noticeable quality in these drawings, I believe, in the student drawings, is the subjectivity and the differences between the works, not the similarities or agreement. And I felt that that was very different as a counterpoint to the observational drawing. This assignment illustrates the parameters of subjectivity and objectivity on my part and their part. And here a student completely violated what my instructions were, put all the influences in one drawing. So there's like many, many, many. And I found this as really the most successful one of the drawings, striking a balance between my choices, their choices, subjectivity and objectivity, and how we might find a common sense of reality that is revealed by the work that we produce. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nadine. You brought a whole different perspective looking at young artists' work there. I really enjoyed that. Thank you. Over to Tanya Kovacs. Her artwork explores the ways that culture, she's an artist and educator, based in the UK. Her artwork explores the ways that culture negotiates how we connect to the natural world. Her practice embraces drawing, writing, teaching, and sculpture, often working in the public realm. Kovacs is an advocate for drawing in its expanded field as a highly significant tool for thinking and expression that provides an infinite, cross-disciplinary and varied means of communication that continues to be expanded and enriched by practitioners. Kovacs' research and advocacy for drawing has resulted in 2 publications: The Drawing Book, A Survey of Drawing, the Primary Means of Expression, and Drawing Water, Drawing as a Mechanism of Exploration, which consisted of drawings thematically linked to the sea, by the sea. More recently, Kovacs has been developing programs of drawing combined with meditation practices that consider drawing as a tool of well-being. Over to you, Tanya.
Thank you, Chloe. I personally have been so impressed already today by evidencing how drawing is a tool of survival, and just how adaptive the speakers have been to circumstance. And drawing correspondence was part of my adaptation. Working with Anita Taylor and Chloe Briggs. Anita needs no introduction, but as director of Trinity, Buoy, Wharf Drawing Prize, Drawing Projects UK, and Dean of DJ CAD in Dundee, is a model of leadership and how to build drawing communities. Chloe dragged me kicking and screaming into delivering teaching online, delivering and sharing with the drawing community. It was the first 6 months of the pandemic for me were absolute panic, and I wasn't really ready to start sharing, and I just retreated to the studio actually, and it wasn't until forming drawing correspondence with Anita and Chloe that I felt ready to start reaching out to other drawing practitioners and building networks, delivering drawing conversation in new ways. Our first 6-week program was called Grow, and it chimed with the season of spring. We invited various other people to join us with delivering this program, and we selected 10 participants to spend 6 weeks with us. I'm showing you 2 of the drawings that were selected by the participants to go in a kind of final celebratory publication, which marked the end of the program. This is a drawing by Sarah Prohl and Hondartza Fraga on the right, shot of her studio. The 10 participants went on to form their own drawing drawing network, Hi-Fi Collective, which exceeded our expectations of the kind of peer learning and peer community that would come out of the programme. And they made shows together, and sales from those shows they then donated for a bursary place for our next 6-week programme, which was called The Body I Am In, that took place in the autumn going into winter. So we took it as a kind of opportunity to use drawing as a tool of wintering well and exploring how we occupy our physicality. This is our exquisite corpse drawing. I love that this surrealist technique has cropped up already today, but with drawings from each member of the group made into one body for this period of time, working together as we were folded into each other. Again, I'll show a couple of drawings made by participants. Gary Barker, this is a self-portrait made through touch, and The Resonance of Maternity by Elaine Burke, who drew a very good friend of Chloe's, who was very heavily pregnant at the time. We also decided to run, as well as these 6-week programs, we piloted an online surgery, which was just about people coming together for one day. So 6 participants sharing an introduction to themselves and where they were at, and then sharing a drawing, and then there was a discussion, and they received a letter back from us. Our application process for these programs is very simple: 1 letter, 1 drawing. It's not about your CV, it's not about your achievements, it's about where you are now and how might being part of this program support your practice. In terms of things coming up for us, we are part of the Women of the World Festival, which will be kicking off next week. We've supplied 3 drawing prompts, 1 from each of us, that are freely available and downloadable to encourage their audience to draw. So they're meant to be very open invitations. I'm working with a colleague I've worked with for some time now on a whole set of events that explore that relationship between drawing and meditation, and we're running an online event on Monday hosted by Women of the World that's encouraging people to take an hour out of their very busy lives to slow down and think about how drawing marks time, marks space, the simple act of taking a breath, making a mark, and how that might kind of feed into your own well-being. And our next programme, which is timed for kind of late spring, is called Nature as Witness. And we'll look at how drawing helps us navigate what I believe is one of our critical relationships, and that's the relationship with the natural world. Again, something that the period of lockdown and where it has slowed people down in so many ways is an equivalence to what a drawing practice does. The way it does slow you down, forces you to notice things in more detail. And this drawing programme will look at how drawing helps us negotiate that relationship, helps us to kind of find space for ourselves, find space for that relationship with the non-human and the beyond human. And possibly even how nature witnesses us. We do charge for our sessions because we wanted to work in a way that would be sustainable for us at a time when it felt like the world was pretty shaky for any freelance creatives. Wasn't clearly understood what was going to happen to the world of work either. And I would say that the plat that I'm involved with Chloe and Anita, these 2 other women, has been like a lifeline for me. It's a braid that has made me feel much more secure in uncertain times and lets me understand that drawing is both a weapon of choice and a tool of survival. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. It's quite hard to respond to that because I'm so intimately involved in that one. Thank you. It was beautiful hearing it from you. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to hand over to Anita, who may have
I think we've just got one question in there, which is actually for Callan, which is around, can people attend queer life drawing if you're not publicly out as a queer person?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So we are open to everyone and all abilities of drawing and experience and things. And everyone is welcome to join. We just work exclusively with queer models, and there's no pressure to sort of be out. If you are a queer person who is not yet out, you can come. There's no distinction really. You'd be safe to come on.
Oh, wrong one, sorry. I'm having trouble with the controls here. So there are a number of commonalities, I think, but I think the questions are going to come at the end. And I think what's so fascinating is this intentionality of bringing people together and to work through things that are deeply meaningful. And the way that that's brought everybody together. And I think the teaching question is really interesting because we've got a balance of people who are bringing together collective community connection through things that they feel very strongly and identify with. But we've also got, Nadine, who's actually teaching a formal class that you were teaching before. And there's a kind of balance of adaptability, isn't there, about the way things come together. And I don't know if anyone's got any reflection on what they felt through that. I mean, Lizzie, you may also feel the same, and Tanya, about that sense of the difference between having to transition, if you like, activity that took place before lockdown and the opportunity that lockdown presented to work in different ways.
Over to you, Nadine.
Okay, I just want to comment, and we had to pivot very quickly. My school is in New Jersey, so we had a very high COVID rate towards the beginning of the pandemic in this country. And I think that in the beginning, there was a lot of like, are you okay, going on between faculty and students. Just like we would just sit there sort of stunned, like, are you okay? Are you okay? But I think that the pivot came when we realized the potential of teaching remotely on Zoom, that you could have a kind of intimacy that was not really possible in the classroom. I mean, we were teaching from each other's homes, or the students were in their bedrooms in these private spaces. And I think that really helped and sort of connected to me with the need for the subjectivity in the assignments, rather than to try to say that there was this objective thing out there that we were all going to do the same thing. So I don't know, that's what I want to say.
I think that's exactly what happened, and I think the intimacy that it facilitated and the sense of the difference it made to your students was really obvious and clear through the presentation. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment, otherwise I would suggest that people are gathering up their questions for the end. I'm sure this is a question we may come back to.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Part 2. That was wonderful. Again, even more to think
really
about.
Wonderful.
Okay, I will move on to part 3, the last part. Alex Roberts is an artist, a painter that focuses upon how we perceive identity, change, and encounters. A recent exhibition listings include Ever Emerging Magazine, the Berlin edition, With Love 2, Paint Talk, Happy Hour, Kristen Heidegger Gallery, London Bridge. Her research interest in exploring the spectacle and non-reveal of identity resonate in her lecturing and curating. Alex's practice involves a studio-based form of research centered around the relationships of painting and drawing, painting through drawing, drawing through painting, often extending to collaborative forms of curation which seeks to examine how painting beholds the viewer. She is the lecturer in drawing at Duncan and Jordanstone College of Art and Design, where she steers life drawing and wider drawing practice for interdisciplinary art and design. Other academic roles include visiting lecture at Bauhaus Summer School in Weimar and media design, Hochschule für Design und Informatik, University of Applied Sciences Berlin, alongside supporting Drawing Projects UK. Over to you, Alex.
Thank you very much, Chloe. I've just at this very timely moment noticed a massive storm cloud outside my window and the internet connection is a little bit flaky. So if I suddenly go off radar, forgive me, that's what's happened, but it won't be anything personal. It's so lovely to be here this afternoon. I put it to you to imagine your younger self, or rather imagine, say, a young art student or art and design student, possibly English is not your first language, drawing skills, and how those tentative marks might be shared amongst a group, let alone be daunted by being presented to draw a naked body from the opposite sex that maybe you haven't had an opportunity to fully view yet. So I would suggest that you pause. Now reimagine this scenario being impeded by a global pandemic. How to solve the challenge of keeping life drawing active, engaged, and inspired for art and design students during what became our lockdown. And to give you a little personal insight on that, I was often in my kitchen corner streaming life drawing to students where, you know, neighbours and people thought I was up to all sorts. That's just a personal activity. How do you keep a drawing community open, moving, flourishing during a period of closure and isolation? And for me, the answer was driven by understanding what is at the root of life drawing: process, practice, presence. Drawing is physical, it's communicative, and it relies on connections and observations and sensing, recordings, and that regular form of trial and error. And life drawing, I feel, evolves amongst a collective, social, and palpable presence. So how did we solve this problem? So the methods involved meant really adjusting face-to-face life drawing to be interactive, socially constructive, and with effective technology formats like Teams or Blackboard or Padlet that we've heard that people mentioned this afternoon. But this was devised by a mixture of tutor-guided and student-led initiatives, creating a virtual life drawing room, embracing a digital experience to relate as closest to the real as possible. And I highlight here, embracing the digital's specific characteristics, you know, the screen surface, for example, of how light is perceived and how would you discuss and teach tone. But creating a virtual life drawing room that was inclusive of the social presence of propagating a drawing community. In practical terms, that meant teaming up behind the scenes with Drawing Projects UK to continue long-standing working relationships to film reliable and wonderfully talented life models, and therefore implementing some resources. And then armed with a plethora of technology and interactive learning methods at our disposal, for example, show and share virtual pinboards that you get through some of these digital programs. We've mentioned Padlet this afternoon, or Teams, or Zoom as we're on now. Or simple sessions where, you know, the tutor suddenly became the muse to kind of break down the ice, you know, of the situation and make people feel more involved in the environment. Or even ice breaking out into little rooms digitally where they could draw from each other, so that it felt fresh and exciting and interactive, and that they were involved and that they were guiding the situation. But the main driving factor for me was that the inclusive student experience really arose from the continual facilitating of a conscious belonging for students and for staff, like a drawing hub, for want of a better word, which ironically has perpetuated its own momentum, resulting in many student presentations. That sense of belonging, or that sense of longing, there's a sense of human connectivity of wanting to share. And amongst this visual lineup, we've got examples you've seen so far from a projected showreel shaped by Leicester School of Art, De Montfort University's To Draw community, which was partnershiped with Drawing Projects UK, supplying wonderful film footage with my support. And it was a staff and student evening drawing series of workshops. Alongside, you'll see shortly, some examples from what the students wanted to kind of share, which was Duncan and Georgetown College of Art and Design University of Dundee students, where they curated and designed and produced a physically printed publication titled Lockdown Drawing. So there was a sense that we might be all in a virtual world, and there's very much that immediate moment of show and share within the screen, but equally they wanted to tangibly take something out into the world beyond as well, which was exciting. But facilitating online drawing sessions, really enjoying stumbling across social media shares of people displaying their drawing outputs. And I'd just like to say thank you on a personal level. It has always been this unexpected viewing, which has given so much joy. When you least expect it, it's a nice smile. And especially when we felt sometimes quite isolated. So whether it was my humble kitchen corner via Berlin or via the UK, via Trowbridge, we were finding we were bringing a way of people together. And the conclusions I found that I've had the pleasure to witness students and staff sensibilities rising to a challenge that has lent to a community of practice and exchange. And I mean, that's become, as I say, localized, national and international, and it has thrived. It hasn't been a poor replacement, it's been something that's just thrived in its own right. As a result, interdisciplinary connection is wanting in a big way. Isolation and wider inclusion agendas have been embraced, and things are changing for the future. You know, I felt pedagogical shifts with how we approach and deliver and share drawing practices were expanding, integrating, I suppose, a virtual life drawing existence with a face-to-face teaching situation for the long term. And I suppose also widening life drawing and drawing deliveries to greater numbers, locations with blended means to learn and engage, and sparking further inquisitive forms of social exchange. And in some of these latter slides that will soon come up, you'll see several examples of how virtual life drawing, the learning experience for all, that's the participants, the tutor, and I say that therefore no hierarchies, has developed to other areas of my own personal online teaching practice. And this is including something very simple like observations and drawn basic marks at the heart of drawing have progressed to independent design projects for a group of students, for example, in the Media Design Hochschule in Berlin, our digital learning interactions, drawing exchanges. So to summarize, I'm hoping that you can sort of hear me on sync, because I know that I've got a weird internet connection at this very moment, so I know my images may not be coming aligned with the information that I'm sharing. But to summarize, really, there's an exciting feeling for me that there's an inclusive institutional and non-institutional culture is developing that observes and learns and offers really drawing research networks and communities with a scope for international partnerships and cross-community futures. And I really trust there is more to follow. So I would suggest, please just watch this space, and I look forward to sharing more with you in the future. Now, I have a feeling, Chloe, some of those images may be slightly out of kilter there, because I've got a very slow lead. So I don't know if I'm overrun the images or not, because my screen's going a bit fuzzy.
That sounded amazing, your voice there. I'm just going to go through them.
I was going to say, Chloe, I'm slightly on time today. I can't hear very well. I think I've got literally the storm above my head to break.
No, you did brilliantly, but I'm just going to go, I'm going to go through, and I realized that was your last slide there. And amazingly, it's actually by a student that I once taught, Vanessa, amazingly, but it's beautiful seeing all of the range of student work through the life room as well. Again, it's wonderful seeing young artists' perspective. Thank you. And I understood what the starry symbol meant on your presentation now.
That's, I think, been a technical glitch all week, but
okay, I think this might be your last slide.
I think there's just a couple more, yeah.
open call drawing exchange. And we have a thank you. Thank you so much, Alex. We got your words clearly most of the time.
Well, listen, as I say, lovely to have been here. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, thank you. So over to Duncan Cameron, who is an artist and lecturer living in Somerset, UK. He runs the Art Foundation course at Strode College, sometimes teaches with Falmouth and Plymouth universities, and has been an art lecturer for 28 years, teaching fine art, life drawing, animation, and many other things. He is interested in museum culture and collection, and alongside his fine art practice, makes puppets for theatre productions, illustrates, and is currently working towards the completion of a fine art PhD with the University of Plymouth. He also enjoys diving and keeping bees. Wonderful. Over to you, Duncan.
Thank you, Chloe. That's a lovely introduction. Hello, everybody. I'm from sunny Somerset. Spring feels like it's here. And it reminds me very much of those moments 2 years ago that we all experienced as we went into lockdowns in our respective locations. So much of what I was going to say, obviously, it's been kind of covered in some ways. And actually, yeah, there's a sense of how do I follow that? And actually, a lot of things Alex was just saying, I agree with entirely in terms of building those online communities. For me, the first part of lockdown with 6 children at home was very much about trying to build a kind of consistency of kind of enjoyment and fun and stability. So a lot of outside walking, casting animal tracks in nature. That was a big part of our world as a family, alongside moving teaching online. Like a lot of lecturers, I felt suddenly, how do I reach my audience? How do I communicate and teach? And I started making lots of films about drawing and casting animal tracks and studying nature and anatomy and many other things, and beginning to build that resource and sharing that with my students on my level 2, level 3 and higher courses in the foundation. Like a lot of lecturers and teachers in art, I was looking for other ways also to communicate, and started working with Isolation Art School, which was Keith Tyson's initiative online. And that was a great space, just a really nice space for many creative people. I know Jake and others here probably contributed. I know contributed also. And it was just another online space where you could begin to build that resource for so many people feeling isolated and building new links. That sense of online community was really fostered for me by joining many online groups that I previously hadn't worked with, like Draw Brighton, Adrian Dutton at London Life Drawing, work with Artist Support Pledge, and teaching new ways to work professionally and vocationally as a freelancer whilst isolating, and of teaching, obviously vocational courses. A big part of that is about students building their online presence and beginning to understand how they can make a living. So Artist Support Pledge was a really good model for that, and continues today. And they're doing great work at the moment with Ukraine Support Pledge, which they've just launched. So, it's finding lots of new ways to work as all of us, and then beginning to share that. One of the things as a teacher and as a foundation course manager that I was very involved with was trying to help other teachers teach online, and quickly how to set up cameras, how to buy cheap mounts for your phone, how to just manage the technical challenges that we were all suddenly faced with. And of course, although the many restrictions of lockdown, were landed on everybody, it forced invention. And of course, when you're teaching, one of the things you're always trying to strive for is invention and risk and play. And actually, we were really forced onto our back foot, as I said earlier, having to pivot quickly. So how do you teach sculpture, from home? So I was teaching students and staff about how to use second devices, how to use a phone as a camera, how to light things, how to use visualizers to teach drawing. And thinking of many little exercises, like drawing hands was something I was doing a lot with my first years for a period of time, and focusing on kind of quick portraiture and so on. So finding new models to work in kind of bite-sized chunks and kind of punchy, fun, engaging practices for students who were working from their bedrooms, working from home, working in a kind of physical isolation, but trying to build that community. One of the things I very quickly started doing, was having a weekly session or 2-weekly session where we'd start and end the week with kind of drawing each other on Zoom. And that was actually really, really positive, because a lot of teaching pedagogy kind of moved into kind of PowerPoint delivery, which is so flat the best of times. And so much of my teaching has been about removing that sense of isolation and building those collaborative opportunities in a space. So I was very keen that we maintain that sense of conversation and the less hierarchical kind of nature of the drawing each other, and playing with ideas like adding word boxes, imagining what we're all thinking, because we all felt so apart, and finding kind of playful ways to kind of lift the teaching experience day by day. As soon as I was allowed out and about, I went to London to get my daughter's stuff from her abandoned flat. and drawing people on the tube. And that was really exciting and an interesting moment. And I know a lot of us all felt that suddenly when you're out in the world again, you could draw people, and wanting to kind of capture the history. And Bristol Art Library have now published that, which is lovely as a book, a wonderful collective in Bristol Performative Library. One of the other things we did quite a lot of with my art team was we were working with unusual materials. So working with things like on the right there, shoe polish or tea and coffee, finding ways to kind of playfully draw at home without the normal art supplies or access to equipment. And that actually led to a lot of really inventive teaching from my colleagues and lots of fun, you know, with all of our art teams in the level 2 and 3 and 4 programs. Working with collage, working from your kitchen table. This is my kitchen table covered in art supplies, and trying to think, how can I teach and make teaching inventive from a home space and without access to the normal equipments and materials. But again, that limited kind of palette, as if you wish, was really, you know, really a spur for many. And these are my colleagues, Chris Loughlin on the right, teaching painting skills using coffee, and a great friend Sue Green here on the left, using unusual materials, handmade brushes. And that was really good fun. And there were some great results from across the teaching team, across the student body, just finding new ways to work, again, using kind of inventive ways to kind of make practice happen. I did a whole session, my level 2 particularly, that they really enjoyed, making rubber stamps out of you know, erasers, little rubbers, because hand cutting stamps and working with multiples, and in this case, you know, say, you know, adopting a, you know, an on plein air drawing outside in the Somerset levels where I live. So playing the stamps and finding ways to kind of build new practice. It was interesting to be asked to contribute to Falmouth University Drawing Festival. I remember during lockdown, how do I teach, you know, kind of 2 days of drawing meaningfully to a range of people 150 miles south of me in Falmouth? And actually using a visualizer was a really good tool. So I moved very quickly from second devices, phones and such, to a visualizer, and that was great. The creativity that lockdown provided was also a real spur within my family. I've got 6 kids. We're trying to keep it busy and fun and interesting. And here we are recreating artworks as a family and a broader family on Zoom. So this is after the Medusa, Jericho, in the paddling pool. We had a lot of laughs, as you might imagine. And that was really good to try and alleviate the many other pressures of those difficult months. Most of my time was spent in my shed, I have to say, as well, making sculpture. And then talking and working with my students and finding ways to kind of maintain that energy for practice and creative and uplifting experience of community that we so, you know, potentially were missing from being isolated. But, you know, the memories, although challenging, are often very, you know, very positive looking back now through that difficult experience. Thank you. Blimey, that's quick, isn't it?
Thank you, Doug. I think your home looks like an art school. I want to go to your home art school, please.
You're welcome.
So much. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much inspiration. To Be or Not to Be Collective are a BIPOC run life drawing and art CIC that focuses on uplifting visibly marginalized and underrepresented bodies. They work with a variety of organizations, groups and individuals to bring together communities with a focus on fostering new connections, creativity and accessibility to art. Some of their previous collaborators include National Gallery, NHS, Lululemon, University of London, Universal Music, Tate Modern, Kazart, Asa Butterfield, to name a few. They also hold charity sessions to fundraise for different causes, including the Ukraine crisis, Black Trans Foundation, Lebanon Impact, Mission Oxygen COVID, India, Mind, as well as many others. Over to you. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. So before the pandemic and lockdown, life drawing was predominantly something you'd go and do in the space. But when we were all locked inside, this was something that people started to do, and it allowed us to kind of expand and change what life drawing could be. There's no limits to how many people could be in a session. So for that session with Asa Butterfield, we had about 400 people on, and that's just, you can't have 400 people in a room drawing one model. So this is open things up and possibilities. Having models come and curate their sessions, more akin to performance pieces at times, it changed artists' expectations of what they can get when they attend our sessions. So yeah, we had people from all over the world. There were some people who are very physically isolated, very far away, and they were able to continuously come to our sessions and feel like they were part of the community. we were able to build an international community, people collaborating with people that we would have never have crossed paths with, who were doing very similar things to us, and we were able to collaborate, exchange ideas, and it's just been quite amazing, really. We found that life drawing was very homogenous and not very representative of the communities in which the places that they were taking part in. So we were able to work with different models, with different body types, and increase representation. There was a bit of an issue with language, different barriers there, but we had artists who were able to, you know, help him with us and to translate. So yeah, it was just made for some funny moments. Some models didn't have access to good equipment, and what we found was, especially in Latin America, it basically pushed them towards collaborating with each other and forming collectives of their own to model for these classes. It's very interesting working across time zones. So had artists waking up very early in Melbourne, getting up late in America, and all taking part, and it was just a very interesting experience there. Life drawing usually takes place in pubs and places that aren't necessarily very accessible. So having it online, people were able to get to it, comfort at own home. And yeah, we had people with hearing difficulties and we had to use subtitling software. Didn't get my accent. Yeah, as you saw today, there's always tech issues, comes with the medium, but we just worked for it. Fair pay was, this was important to us. As the models were able to communicate with each other, they were able to discuss what they were being paid. And we found that as a result, we were able to hold other organisers to a higher standard. They were able to discuss who was treating who well, and, you know, some, especially as a life model myself, you know, some organisers can not be very fair, and this was important to discuss. We recorded and made available for purchase at some of our sessions, and that enabled our models to make a bit of residual money from that. So that was a different, like, yeah, interesting thing. Working from the same image, because, you know, in a room, everyone's got a different angle. So working from the same viewpoint, people had to be very creative and experiment with different mediums. So that was good. We had the lovely Yuka Tanaka, who was very creative in what she did, messing around with scale and cutouts. And yeah, just not really something you could do in a room full of people. With the portrait sessions, you know, you could get these very intimate viewpoints right across the model. It's a bit difficult to do that in person. So this kind of expanded the medium out and allowed people to be very creative. This was something interesting we did at the National Gallery, projecting the live models onto a 3D background environment. I was able to just use different technology in our sessions. Yeah, working from home, so we had some physically disabled models, and having a model work from their own safe space, it allowed the sessions to be very intimate, and it's not something you could really do in person always. And running these sessions has been a collaboration with loads of different groups around the world. And it's been an absolute pleasure to meet all the different models and organisers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian. I loved how your presentation was structured, because it gave us very practical information about how you've achieved the amazing things you've achieved this past couple of years. Thank you. This is the last presentation of the day. It's Draw Brighton. Jake Spicer is an author, artist and drawing tutor based in North Wales. He's head tutor of the independent drawing school Draw Brighton, which he founded in 2009, and is co-director of the Drawing Circus. Jake has published a series of books aimed at making drawing accessible to everybody, and teaches drawing at a range of institutions with current courses at the V&A and Pallant House Gallery. Over to you, Jake.
Thanks, Chloe. So this is really a story about community resilience and flexibility in lockdown and beyond. So I moved to Brighton when I was about 20. I didn't know anyone in the city and I hadn't done a degree, and I was just searching for the kind of creative community that you find at art school. So in 2009, I started a little life drawing class just to try and find more artists around town. The weekly untutored life drawing class, this is a photo from one of the sessions. That was in the corner of a shared studio. It grew into a program of daily tutored and untutored classes in a dedicated space. And so another artist, Shelley Morrow, and I founded the life drawing community Draw. We had three founding principles. So we wanted to provide flexible and affordable drawing education available to everyone. We wanted to provide a platform for creative collaboration and to generate income for artists and models in Brighton. And so in March 2020, when our 3 classes a day that we were running just suddenly stopped overnight and our studio stood empty for the first time in a decade, it was quite a shock. 2 years on, it's quite easy to forget the uncertainty of that March before government funding was announced or anything like that. And preparing for this talk, I was really sort of transported back to those early weeks and just how much has changed in such a short space of time. So on the 13th of March, some of our tutors developed coughs, so we closed our studio before lockdown started. We're funded exclusively by income from those classes though. So on the 14th of March, I learned how to use the community patronage site Patreon. And I took this photo of my hand against the wall, the one that's just gone, and built a Patreon page. We decided that we still needed to fulfill the 3 aims without interruption. So providing flexible and affordable drawing education being a key thing. So this is a drawing from a drawing tutorial that Lance put together about drawing from your window. On the 16th of March, we took a really big risk and we spent all £1,500 of our remaining cash reserves, our April studio rent, and paid all of our core models to pose for a photo shoot that we plan to use on the Patreon and provide drawing materials for anyone that might be isolated during COVID. We didn't know how things would play out. So we launched the Patreon on the 18th of March, and we asked all of our studio regulars to contribute just to keep us going in case there was a lockdown. So we didn't quite know what was going to happen at that point. We had a really amazing response. So 400 of our immediate community supported for between £3 and £75, and then lots of them continued that monthly. So when we got our text a week later from the government and the whole UK went into lockdown, we were actually we had an idea of how we were going to move forward. We found out what Zoom was, and we started a community portrait club where everyone took it in turns to model and pose on Zoom. That's actually continued right until now. I have to say, online life drawing caught me totally off guard. So to be or not to be, way ahead of the curve as far as I was concerned. So I was worried it wouldn't be safe for models or enjoyable for artists, but it's obviously really caught on, and we came to that party late. We started our Zoom sessions sometime in the spring of 2020. But those live Zoom sessions, I think, really emphasize something wonderful that should have been self-evident, that people don't go life drawing just to draw a still naked person. They go to draw together, and they draw to share a moment in time with the model and with other people drawing. So as we were slowly forced to get rid of all of our physical studios, we really embraced the online space. So we lost our 3 studios in Brighton, but we gained an increasing national and international audience for our online classes and people who supported our Patreon. So it really changed our answer to the question, who is our community? Suddenly we were looking at the whole world. So then kind of jumping ahead after the second lockdown in 2021, we have been online only for over a year. We've really grown our international base, but we started to think about raising money for an in-person studio again. We took over the lease on an empty office space in our old studio building, so that's there. And through our new online community, Brighton regulars plus all of these new friends from around the world, we launched a Kickstarter to raise money for the new physical space. So we were masked and had bouts of COVID between all of us, but this is a picture of the studio kind of partway through. We sort of renovated the space and turned it into something more appropriate for life drawing, a sort of proper studio space. It looks great now as well. It's actually developed beyond this photo. But after the third lockdown, we were ready to go back to in-person classes. So we needed to return to those 3 core principles. And in order to stay affordable, we subsidized those in-person sessions with our online income, so with the online classes. To keep them inclusive, we really needed to make sure that they were safe for disabled attendees, anyone that was clinically vulnerable, which meant taking a whole load of new measures, you know, sort of safer air quality in the studio. We doubled the pay for all staff. We have sick pay now for all of our freelancers, and we pay a regular sort of stipend to 50 of our models and tutors. And now, as we're sort of partway through the sort of middle of the pandemic at the moment, but out of the lockdowns, we've lost all of that kind of government financial support, but we've got a really strong foundation on which we can kind of build. And I think that puts us in a better position to navigate the challenges that are ahead. So while online life drawing's become its own really valuable practice, I think one of the most important things about returning to in-person classes is we now have tea and biscuits, which I think are probably 2 of the staples of a good online in-person life drawing session. But I think in a world that's is inevitably going to become less stable over our lifetimes, it's easy to see drawing as a triviality, but it promotes empathy, it teaches us to see the world clearly, and it gives us a shared language for responding to the unfamiliar. So I think there's a real power and comfort to be found in being part of a drawing community. And I've learned that from that community, we can kind of plan, well, we can't plan a clear course ahead with sort of uncertainties that stand in front of us. We can use core principles to navigate new and unfamiliar situations, and being able to do it together, I find to be a wonderful privilege, both in the draw community and more widely. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jake. Beautiful words to close up. It's amazing again what you've achieved too. We've all watched that in awe. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing and hand over to Anita. Maybe there are some questions coming through. And you're muted there, Anita.
And I'm trying to unmute, remove Jake's spotlight. For some reason, it doesn't
you
want to
haven't
do.
aged, Jake. You don't do that early image.
He does, does he?
I think you cheated somehow on that image there. That wasn't 2009.
So there is a question, and the question is really around from Sophia. It's a really good question following on from the discussion we've just had and the presentations, which is for the speakers who plan to or already have moved back into the real world events or teaching, hybrid or 100%, what new drawing exercises, ways of teaching or values will you take offline?
I could go
over to, yeah, brilliant.
I think running the session, doing hybrid sessions has been very, it's challenging, but with regards to taking bits off, like, oh yeah, just want to say, everyone who did a talk today, you smashed it, loved them all, very informative, well done to you all. Yeah, very inspiring. Yeah, hybrid sessions, they're hard, they're long, trying to do, messing around with your camera and everything, and then making sure everyone in the room feels good, and like, it's difficult given the light tuition, but I think having more than one person, like if you're it's impossible to do a hybrid session by yourself, but I recently modelled for Brixton Life Drawing, and they're just like, we either do them online or just in person, don't do the hybrid. It's interesting trying to keep your attention on both. It's difficult, challenging, rewarding. It's great. Come along. We've got a session. We're at the National Gallery next month, so if you want to come along to that.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Does anyone else, Duncan, you want to speak?
Well, yeah, I mean, I went into lockdown I'm a 5-day-a-week lecturer in college, and I have been for a long old time. And so, like all of us, it was a huge shock just to find ourselves isolated. And I found that I really missed the teaching enormously. And so very quickly found solutions and workarounds. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't delighted for the last year or so to being back in college, in workshops, making, and there's so much teaching that is about that kind of physicality of that collaborative experience in a space. So I think that is great to be back, but I think also there are many things that will persist from this, many positive things that have come out of this. Yeah, none least of which, that sense of being part of a huge and broad community internationally in terms of diversity of experience. There's a community of people that I'm now commonly talking to, and my students are, that we just weren't before this. So it's taken down a lot of perceived limitations on the communities you mix in, I think. This is a case in point. Many of the people here speaking, I'm thinking, do I know this person? I think actually they're all on my IG, a lot of them. You realize how many connections you've built over that period. And I think it's also the acceptance that when we first started lockdown, there was a sense that somehow it was lesser, the teaching was going to be a poor relation to the face-to-face teaching space. But actually, I think what a lot of people realized quite quickly was it was just a different space. It wasn't lesser, it was just something new and other. And actually, it's got its own strengths, and there's so many wins. There really are. And I think we have to hold on to those positives in a very challenging space for many reasons globally and around us. So, I think all praise that sense of community and collaboration, because that's one of the huge wins from this experience for everybody, I hope. And it's come up time and again in today's talks, hasn't it?
It has. It's been reinforced all the way through. And I wondered, I mean, Jake, you're the one who very specifically talked about actually why people went to drawing classes, and it is that thing of drawing together, and that was definitely the remit of Drawing Project UK. I wondered, in a way, if we think that drawing does something different to other disciplines. I mean, I'm very conscious that Drawing Projects today, there's our poetry stanza group meeting, and they decided they didn't want to meet online throughout the pandemic. And it's been really interesting to see how some people have focused on what they can do online, and some people in community settings have withdrawn, whereas actually, of course, in formal education, we've all delivered and danced on a pin to transform the way that we work. And it really was dancing on a pin at that moment when we went into lockdown very quickly. So there's a kind of real sense of why we do the things together through drawing, which I think has always been one of its very special characteristics. And I don't know whether that's me reading something into it from a drawing practitioner perspective or a drawing community perspective. But I did wonder on that, and I don't know if anyone wants to respond to that, and then I'll invite Lizzie in.
If I respond, yeah. One thing I think that's been really interesting is sort of the breaking down of the drawing experience into kind of units. So I think with life drawing online, you have the almost kind of purely visual aspect of drawing. So you are presented with a real life human being in front of you, but they have been flattened by the screen. They've been put in a convenient viewfinder, and they've almost sort of like a few of the kind of problems of observational drawing have been solved for the drawer. But then I think that reflects back on us the necessity to exist as physical human beings in our own spaces as well, and not just extensions of the computer. So I've been doing some really interesting exercises with students around trying to look and draw from portraiture, but then at the same time sort of feel around your own face to understand the physicality of your skull sort of sitting underneath that, and then to think about the model that's in front of you on the screen having a skull as well. And I think in some ways the breaking apart of the observational challenges that sort of Zoom has solved for us have then emphasized the importance of some of those physical aspects. And actually that can then allow students to reflect on them much more directly, because they were things that people didn't really think about when they were sitting in a life drawing class. You know, you don't really think about the fact you've got a body necessarily in a session, but I think actually it helps to kind of reflect a certain sort of shared physicality, which I think is really important to engage with through drawing, because then also that takes us away from being cameras, and sort of, you know, really injects the necessary humanity of the process sort of back in again. So I think that's just been really exciting, that it sort of pulled those things apart and then allowed us to kind of reflect on them individually, and kind of collectively through classes. I hope that's an appropriate response.
That's a great response and a real clarity about the way we work in different aspects. And I think it is really interesting about the breaking down and the nature of what we're teaching in drawing, and breaking down very constructively to think about what we actually gain from in-person, from online, and from the different aspects of teaching drawing that we can facilitate. Lizzie, I don't know if you still wanted to come in.
Yeah, I think just sort of completely on that point, because I was presenting for Drawing Box, but I'm a teacher as well, and I teach drawing in the studio for 30 years. And the drawing that mostly I teach is second year, so it's in secondary degree, so it's in a studio communal space rather than a class-based activity. So one of the things that, you know, the painting tutors and ourselves found was that the quieter students during COVID came forward. The students who would usually shy away from discussion or discourse came forward, and some of the more outgoing students rescinded, you know, like they can pull back into themselves. They didn't have that forum for energy to push forward. So coming back into the studio now, which is brilliant to be back, but coming back into the studio now, it's about trying to find ways to bring back out those students. And we were talking the other day at coffee break about how we don't really feel as comfortable anymore just having our one-to-one tutorial about our topic, you know, and that we have to find ways to take the students out of that studio space and talk to them in more informal ways or in more group ways, you know, so not to rely on that one-to-one, the student brings the work and we respond at that stage, and to try and get those personalities to have a space now that they wouldn't have had normally in an art school, I think, you know.
I was going to add, actually, I feel really fortunate because I have drawn with Erhan and Jake and Jeanette through the Royal Drawing School during this year, and they've been a big part of what I've done. And before lockdown, you know, I feel like I took a lot for granted. I took a lot for granted about that sense of community, about, you know, you go to the life room and you're in the room. And I think I took a lot for granted about that sense of accountability, about, you know, how you get your work out there. And then that becomes very difficult in lockdown. But there's ways. And what was interesting for me is just in the last week with London Fashion Week, my experience went full circle, where I managed to get back into the studio and drawing again. And it was, I can't tell you how exciting it was. It was like, it was like my Christmas. It was fantastic. And really exhilarating. And I suddenly realized a few different things crystallized for me. And that was the importance of creative community, the richness that this online life drawing communities has kind of brought into my life. And that there is something unique about being in the room. So that idea of that Erhan was saying about the duality of the hybrid sessions, there was a duality to that practice moving forward. And, you know, there are lots of opportunities in terms of access and people affordability about actually having that experience, you know, online, which is really special, and accessing models and life drawing and methods of working. You know, it's just so rich, and it kind of exploded, you know, like in that sort of quiet moment, it all seemed to take off. So I see a place for both moving forward, and I really value and appreciate the different things they both are.
That's really great, thank you. And Kat, is it Kat that wants to come in?
Thank you. Yes. From my point of view, I lived and worked in the UK for 20 years, and proximity is everything. And so I had access. I mean, you get in the car when you live in Dorset, and then you're in the city in 2 hours into London. Whereas I live 10 hours north of Vancouver, in the middle of the province. If you put a pin in the middle of our province and swung it around, it would be in the middle. It's a vast country. And so the major centers are really spread out. And I think what I wanted to add to the conversation is that by being forced into the community in terms of COVID and having to pivot, which people have mentioned, it's actually brought me to be able to practice with my peers from around the world. And I think Sarah mentioned it really beautifully, and it's come across in everybody's presentations, is that when you are online and you're doing it and you sort of break down the idea of being online and that perceived barrier, there's an ambient presence to each other. And I think that comes with trust, respect, and practice, and just the process of being intimate with yourself and with the ones that you're with on our screen. I mean, for us, we are, we only have 8 people in our group. So there is and I'm sure that's a different presence than having 500 people involved. So I appreciate it. And I know a couple of my peers do that live also in the province. So yeah, it's great practice for us.
I think it's been amazing, the capacity to connect people in remote places, environments across the world. What I'm really interested in is that, I mean, there is a sense of trust and community, but there are some of you who've made very clear kind of statements of behaviour and expectations about how you connect in, which I think sometimes in some fora is needed. So I can see an array of hands. Duncan was up first, followed by Callan, followed by Paul, but can we go? I'm just going to go round in the order you were, and it may mean that things cross over a little, but Duncan.
Okay, just very briefly, I was going to say, thanks, Anita. I was just going to say that actually for all of the wins, many of the most vulnerable of my students certainly found Zoom very difficult. And I found myself, even with my best efforts as a teacher, I found myself kind of frustrated and berating myself afterwards, thinking, how could I make this better? Because screens were going off, or they were sitting in darkness, or they couldn't access the technology and weren't joining meetings. And even with all of the many efforts over the 3 particular lockdowns, that was never wholly resolved. So actually, the opportunity to go into college, even during the thick of the really solid lockdowns, and work with the most vulnerable students was also a joy. And it's easily kind of forgotten, but that for me as a teacher was so important. And actually the colleagues that worked with me, with those students that went in during those periods, paradoxically sometimes got closer, kind of more intimate, kind of one-to-one teaching time than we ever would normally with those most vulnerable learners. Because of course, all of the distraction and pressures of a large class were just taken away from that space. So it's managing that going forwards and being reminded, that many students arrive at that space with very different life experiences, pressures, anxieties, mental health, technology, money, 1,000 things. And, that's not wholly squared by Zoom. And it's great to hear so many people today speaking about reaching out to communities that are often, not maybe seen, and maybe this experience has reminded everybody to make sure they are seen and included fully in everything we do.
I would say here on that. And I think the thing that I think was most shocking about it is how many people don't have access to digital equipment or Wi-Fi or all of the things that we take for granted, in the sense that it's a more democratic way of engaging. But we have to balance the strengths and the weaknesses. I mean, it has meant that we can be more inclusive, more representational in many ways. But I do think we can't forget that actually it does also have a carbon footprint. It does also connect, find problems for some people who can't connect so easily. But I think it's a really important testament that we remember, and part of the rationale for doing these events is to think of, so that we do document and think back and reflect on what happened in that extraordinary time, because it's easy to slide back into normality. So that's why I think it was such a good question about what do we keep and what do we retain, and I think that's a really fabulous answer. I'm going to move to Callan, and then Jeanette and Paul, and then Georgie.
Thank you. I should just say I have a cat who is protesting behind me, so apologies for the noise, but it is a Zoom event, so where would we be without one? I just wanted to very briefly say I absolutely agree with Duncan, and there are many vulnerable people who do not have access to spaces such as these. One of the incredible benefits of online spaces has been for those who are vulnerable and are able to access virtual spaces. You know, as a disabled person, it's very difficult for me to access spaces, even in my own city. I have the privilege of living in Edinburgh, which is full of incredible drawing opportunities and amazing artwork. But it's having an online session that you can go to and things, it's absolutely amazing. And I think there's been a lot of discourse around the lockdown and around accessibility, broadly speaking, for people with disabilities who are able to access different sorts of work now and engage in everything like everybody else have been before. And I'm really excited to see what happens over the next few years with online learning and online drawing, and also the kind of parallel return to in-person spaces. I think it's going to be fascinating. But yeah, I just wanted to say that. I think
it's a really important contribution, and I think it has been really, really important in terms of how we have facilitated engagement in different ways. And even when spaces are accessible, actually getting to them isn't always so easy. So I do think, the spaces it has made have been incredibly valuable, as you've said. So it's a great testament to both the need, but also the things that have happened in response. Jeanette was next, and Paul. You can speak together.
It might even be, we'll just argue. And one thing, it's funny, the whole kind of lockdown mindset in terms of sort of how you access education, it hasn't gone away. One thing we greatly noticed since about October last year onwards was sort of visitors to schools were kind of made possible again, that people sort of from many miles away sort of requested in person. That notion of we were available, and can you come in person, like Scotland, Newcastle, Southwest, all over the place. So I think in people's mind, people do have the sense that both options are. We still get people wanting kind of online tuition, but they have very much decided that if we can have it online, why can't we have it in person? Again, in terms of what we've brought from our own sort of lockdown practices, a lot of my workshops have now been with the non-dry materials. A lot of Jeanette's include sort of like snippets from films and pens. So all the sort of little innovations that we play with, and
we've been able to
in our heads, we kind of like thought they were for sort of quite small audiences in a way. That intimate, the intimate playing around, what happens if you do this, what happens if you try that, all those kind of intimate little experiments in your own room or your own sort of lockdown sessions. So they do sort of finally start to sort of find larger audiences.
I agree, and I think it's the balance of things, and actually we can now have a much richer template and relationship with a whole range of people delivering drawing. And as Duncan's also noted to us as a panel, clearly one of the other benefits is actually all the recordings that have taken place, and however unpolished some of them might be, they do give an amazing access and an amazing resource for people to get back to and to re-find and connect in that way. We've got 4 minutes left till we conclude, so we've got 2 more panelists wanting to speak. So I'm hoping that you may have a short and sharp answer, which would be really great, so that we have time to do some thanks. And now we've got Tanya too. So over to you, Georgie.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll be brief. Yeah, great discussion. I just thought, going back to that original question from the audience member, I just thought it was interesting asking about what values we'd bring back into in-person teaching or hybrid teaching. And for me, I think it's like the fun of drawing, because we went through such a tough time. And actually for me, as a teacher, as a drawer, freelance practitioner, as a student myself, because I was doing my PG cert, it was actually like trying to find fun in drawing and just drawing for fun and not for a project or for assessment, and you know, for students, you know, that kind of assessment and that kind of stress around doing well in your degree, actually just finding the fun again in drawing and taking that pressure away. So yeah, in answer to that part of the question, I think it's just drawing for fun and trying to remove those pressures for me. Thanks.
That's fantastic, thank you, and a really good reminder about the need for fun and play within drawing. So thank you, Georgie. Nadine.
I just want to say briefly that the surprising result of teaching remote live drawing classes has been that where I work, they've decided to keep 25 to 30% of courses delivered in that way and not going back to the older way. It's an amazingly good way to deal with working students. And we have something called the CARES Act, in which there's COVID emergency funds, and students that would not normally have access to technology can access materials and so on, and technology that way. So I think it's probably here to stay, and it's got some very good things for teachers and for students.
I agree too, lots of benefits, and we're just learning to use the benefits well, as well as the other essential things about working in person. Tanya, one last comment from you.
It was just a reflection really on this session, and just how this evidences there has been a major revolution in education and how we communicate with each other, and just how different an arts education is to other forms of education. I mean, knowing students that are taking other subjects, where the move to having your lectures online, you wouldn't be having a symposium about having your lectures online. I'm just amazed at the diversity and resilience of our cultural sector so many times, but today has just really made me think about that. And to never underestimate how hard we've all worked to achieve this. And it was just a kind of general, like, just make sure everyone takes the time to look after themselves during this process of moving back, where there are still these online expectations as well. Like, how do we blend these things in our heads, not just on our screens? Yeah, I've just been absolutely blown away by today. So it's been a real privilege to listen to you all. Thank you.
That's brilliant, Tanya, and what brilliant words actually to round the session, because I agree with you, and I think it's about understanding the ecologies of what we've discovered. I think we have transformed practice, the way we communicate, and I think the astonishing way that communities of practice, the drawing community, has extended, grown, developed, and allowed so many people to participate. I think it's astonishing, but everybody in this presentation and many more across the world are the actors who facilitated that to happen. And I couldn't agree with you more, is that there's real joy in making these things happen, but there's also, you know, the making sense of what should continue, what should be transformed into other practice, and how we create a balance around those things. That seemed to be the thing that came out from everyone's presentations, and there will be formats that work for some and formats for other, but what we've seen is this astonishing ecology of teaching drawing, connecting through drawing, building communities through drawing, and the resilience is phenomenal, because it was a real resilience, hard won in those kind of very challenging times that appeared very quickly, completely across the world in response to the pandemic, but out of it, some good, some amazingness, and let's hope that we can use resilience carefully and selectively to address the other challenges that we know are happening in a really precarious world. And I think that drawing and the community of drawing actually have an amazing part to play in how we really think about what it is to be human, what we really think about how it is to facilitate everyone to be creative and to see what they're thinking, see what they're imagining, and share what they're experiencing through the act of drawing. I'd like to say a phenomenal and huge thank you on behalf of the audience and Chloe and myself to our 12 presenters. You've been astonishing, really fabulous presentations. And I'd really like to say an enormous thank you to our audience for joining us. It's been a really life-enhancing afternoon. And I think we've learned so much about how people have been working, the kinds of activities, the kinds of processes, the technicalities, the social endeavour, and the politics surrounding that. It's been a really enriching, rewarding afternoon. So one enormous thank you to everybody. So a big virtual clap, and I'm sure I can see lots of fantastic thank yous coming in and feedback in the chat. And it's time to close our session for this evening. We will make the recording available on the Drawing Project UK YouTube in due course. And I would also say there is one final part of the public engagement programme from Drawing Projects UK in association to the Trinity Buoy Wharf Drawing Prize before we hand over to Tahi Kovacs and Alex Roberts and the Cooper Gallery in Dundee to share the next events, is that we've made, because Gary Lawrence, who we very much wanted to hear him talk about his drawing Keyhole Surgery as the award-winning drawing, who doesn't have the apparatus to join us online, the technology to join us online to do that. So we've made a short film and it's available on the Drawing Project UK YouTube site from this evening. And then Fiona Cassidy and I, Fiona produced and directed the film, will hold a session to talk about that in the context of a drawing discussion. So I'd like to say one enormous thank you. Trinity Buoy Wharf Drawing Prize heads to Cooper Gallery in Dundee from the 21st of March until the 18th of April. So those of you further north in the UK, please do go and enjoy the exhibition. Thank you to the Arts Council England for facilitating the exhibition at Drawing Project UK and the public engagement programme. Thank you all. Have a lovely afternoon, morning, evening, wherever you are in the world. Take care. Thank you.